Hello, everyone. Thank you all for taking time to join us today, our first version 1 PeopleSoft UK Global Payroll SIG webinar. For those who don't know me, I'm Simon Bosco and I work as part of the PeopleSoft account management team here at version 1. Presenting from version 1 will be my colleague, Gary Lindsay. I'll let him introduce himself, but he has been at Cedar stroke version 1 even longer than me, so a very, very long time. So just so you understand the flow of the webinar, Gary will do an introduction to the session, followed by a quick update from Oracle's Pravas Bhagat, Director for PeopleSoft Global Payroll Development. Gary will then continue his presentation on end of year and start of year updates. We'll cover a bit about ideas for testing approaches, and then hopefully that will leave us a bit of time for a bit of a discussion at the end.
All right, thank you, Simon. Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. I just wanted to quickly run through the agenda for the session today, where time is very limited, so we do want to get on with it. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to Pravas, as Simon mentioned, and he's going to give us an update from the Oracle viewpoint about some of the updates that are going to be released very, very quickly with regard to the start of the next tax year. Then when Pravas is finished, I will pick up again, and we're just going to have a look at a couple of the year-end updates that came out quite a while ago, just to make sure that we're all aware of those. Then we'll start looking at the start of year updates that were released towards the end of January, just to give you a quick run through of those items and highlight anything that we think you need to be aware of, and also field any questions that you might have where possible on that as well. Then we will have a look at the options that may be open to us with regard to the approach for testing, and where appropriate run through a potential cycle, which would be the normal process that we as an organization would be doing if we were running a test cycle for our clients, or internally for anything like this for year end. And then at the end of the session, I've just got and any other business section just to highlight one thing that has just been released that might be of interest to you, and then we'll close out the session with any further questions that people may have, and then if there, as Simon says, if there is anything that we can't cover today or answer today, we will be capturing all of your questions, and we will feed back to everybody who attends in details of any responses that we have following this finished. I will pick up again. So over to you, Pravas. I am going to make myself mute now.
Thank you, Gary. Hello all, my name is Pravas Bhagat. I am the Director for Global Payroll UK Development for Oracle. And today in this session, I'll just give you a quick update of the various changes that we know of as of now. And we will also talk about the dates of releases that we have, which we have planned. So let's go ahead with that. Gary, to the next slide. Yeah, this is a safe harbor statement from Oracle. We can move to the next slide. Okay, so the start of year, right? So for the start of year, the rates, when we prepare these presentations, the rates were not yet approved. One thing that has changed between yesterday and today is there has been an update to these rates on the HMRC website. However, it's not completely approved. There's a statement on the HMRC website which says you can go ahead and use the rates that they've published currently. So there might be some changes to what is available on this presentation slide, but I'll just walk through what we see and what is different, right? So as of now, we had the rates for Scotland, the income tax rates and bands that were available. Student loan and PG loan thresholds were available. Statutory payment rates for the tax year 2020-21. That's available. NI rates and thresholds, and the pensions automatic enrollment thresholds for the tax year 2020 and 21. So these were the proposed rates that are available as of now. We still need to get confirmation from HMRC that these are finalized. As everyone knows, the budget session for this year got delayed, and it's now going to be held on March 11th due to all the political changes that have happened in the UK. So we were waiting for the rates for UK and Wales to be published. I see some updates on the HMRC website, but we still need to confirm those as far as UK and Wales is concerned. We have to wait for the budget to actually be sure that there is nothing else that is required from a payroll standpoint. And for that reason, we will be able to comment on the budget changes only once the budget is done post March 11th. All right. Next slide. Okay, so as I said, the rates for Scotland that were proposed. So as you see, these are the current rates that have been proposed. The change that has happened between yesterday and today is that there has been an update on this, and we see on the HMRC website that the rates that are currently been updated by HMRC shows that there are no changes to the Scottish income tax rates and bands. However, the earlier proposal, which you can see on this slide, says that there was change to the tax rates, but we wanted to get confirmation of this. So the basic and intermediate rates were changed in the earlier draft, but what we see today as of yesterday is that it looks like they've reverted it back. But this is something that we've requested HMRC to give a confirmation. I haven't received anything yet. So as of now, we will continue to use the older rates, and once we get a confirmation, we will change it, to make it in sync with what's currently published. Then the other thing that's published is the student loan and PG loan thresholds. So the student loan thresholds have changed for this year. We've given the details below. The PG loan thresholds continue to be the same as last year, and there's no change for the same. Next slide. Okay, with regards to the statutory payment rate, so this is again what was proposed for the upcoming year. And as you can see, the payment rates have changed. So the details are available on this slide if you want to go into the details. Next slide, please. The same with the NI rates. So we've tried and listed down the changes in the NI rates for the employee rate, the employer rate, and the NI threshold rates for 2020-21. Next slide, please. Okay, the other change that has come up is with regards to pension, automatic enrollment thresholds. So the thresholds have changed for this year, and those are the current rates that have been published by the HMRC. All right, so those are the changes that we had as of prior to Feb 25th. There have been, like I said, there has been a change for the Scottish rates that have been mentioned now. So that's something that we are analyzing and cross-checking with HMRC. This slide depicts the various patches that we've released and what is going to come up. So the first 6 changes with regards to employment allowance, class 1A NICs, off payroll worker, statutory parental bereavement pay and leave, company car details, and RTI changes have been posted. So these are posted as a PRP. So we released the PUM 33 image, and post the PUM 33 image, we posted the PRP, which contains all the changes. So for you to uptake these changes, you will need to apply this PRP on top of PUM 33, and then pull in these changes to be applied on your systems. The next thing that we have, which I explained earlier, was the start of year changes. So these are the dates that we had proposed. So for the 9.2 PRP posting, The target is 20th of February, that is tomorrow. So end of business UK time, we are planning to post the PRP. The only thing that has changed since the time we've announced this date was that like I said, there was an update from HMRC yesterday. So we are reviewing the changes. As of now, we just see the Scottish rates have been reverted back by HMRC, so we need confirmation around it. However, in the interest of all the other changes and in the interest of time for the customers, we will go ahead and post the PRP for tomorrow. If there is a change, we will try and inform all the customers if there's a change in date for this. But as of now, it looks firm that we're going to go ahead and do the posting. As far as the Scottish rates are concerned, with the changes that are coming up, we might have to do a subsequent PRP in the coming week or so to update the rates for this PRP. So that's for 9.2. For the raw releases, if any customer is on release 9.0 and 9.1, the SOI changes for that will be released on 4th of March. That is next week. That's for the start of year. Can you just move to the next slide? Yes. Before I move into the contents of this slide, on the budget changes, so I keep getting questions from customers and partners alike that is there any target or dates for the postings for changes post the budget announcements. So as of now, we haven't given any dates. We do understand it's very critical to get those changes out. However, as of now, our hands are tied waiting for the budget. Only once we analyze if there are any further changes that need to be done, we will be able to specify a timeline. We do know that these changes need to come out as quickly as possible, so we'll be trying our best to get that out. But as of now, we don't have any dates. The moment the budget is done on 11th of March and we get a draft of the budget, which approximately takes 2 to 3 days or more based on when HMRC publishes it, based on that, we would be able to provide a timeline. But our hope is that most of those changes would have already been, part of what we're delivering, and should give customers enough time to take majority of the changes. All right. Coming to this slide, just wanted to highlight two things. On the My Oracle support, we do keep our position statement updated, which normally has contents of changes and upcoming legislations. We also have another article on My Oracle support, which actually lists out all the changes that are required for the customers to uptake for this year 2020-21 for the legislative deliverables. So it does have changes starting from the end of your patches to the start of your patches. It also enlists which images these particular patches will be coming out, and if there is a PRP or a special posting that is available for these. So I do request customers and partners to bookmark these, and if you're any doubt about the postings, you can take a look at either the first link or the second one to get confirmation on the postings from Oracle. All right, and I've just listed up a couple of links about the various changes that are there, which you can follow up and if you want to read more about the changes. All right. Yep, that's all I had.
Right then, moving on. Or moving slightly backwards as it actually is here. Just wanted to highlight a couple of items that were released quite some time ago, really, in anticipation of the end of the current tax year that we're just about to come across now. And towards August, September last year, there was an update released for the P60 template for the 2019-2020 tax year, which includes a new field, as you can see there, for the postgraduate loan deductions that may well have been recorded. Now, with regard to the testing of this, if you're still producing the hard copy P60s, then you will need to test that, but also make sure that if you're using the ESS self-service versions of the P60s, make sure that that is working for you ahead of time as well. So if you can incorporate that into your testing cycle for the year end, then that would be a really useful piece of testing for you to actually complete. Now then, and also in addition to that, there's a new field being added to the RTI adjustment details page for the current tax year as well, which is for postgraduate loans, as you can see there. So if you need to add anything into the adjustment page for that, that field is now available for you to use for the current tax year as well. There's not a huge amount of changes that we need to worry about for testing purposes, but those two items are important because they came out a little while ago, and it will be worth just making sure that you've already applied those updates, and if not, follow through with the necessary changes that are required. So Pravas gave us a little bit of a background just a minute ago about the updates that have already been released just at the end of January for the start of year for the 2020-2021 tax year, and they cover the items that hopefully you can see on the screen now, which would be some work around employment allowance, company car changes, statutory parental bereavement pay, off payroll worker rules, the Class 1 NIC on termination payments, and any of the changes to the RTI reporting processes that would be required to take everything into account for anything that has changed for the current tax year. So I'm going to move forward with this. And the first couple of items I just wanted to give you a quick précis on would be, first of all, the employment allowance. There's new rules applicable from the 2021 tax year regarding eligibility and how what the organisation needs to do to make sure that they, first of all, are eligible, and secondly, can set the system up to make sure that they can actually put that information through. And to allow that, the pay entity details page has actually been amended to allow the employers to update the relevant information. I won't go into much detail at this point because hopefully you've had guidance on that anyway, but Oracle have provided the functionality to allow you now to update the system in order to take that into account. And then additionally, the RTI car details page has been updated to cater for ultra low emission vehicles, or that's part of the changes that have been put through there. So there's a couple of extra fields that have been added onto this page for date first registered, which is going to be important, and also any zero emissions mileage to be recorded for an individual, and then that will then be fed through as part of the submissions each year. Now then, we have our first poll coming up now, which Simon has very kindly opened, I do believe, which is just to ask the question: out of how many of you, who is affected by the company car changes? Because obviously it's a different world out there now, where we don't have so many company cars out there. So it's quite interesting to see how many people this will actually affect. Functionality wise, it will not affect your payroll processing or anything like that, but you are well set should you need to actually apply those changes for that update. Okay, thank you for your responses on that. So we're looking at 10% saying yes, 50% no, and then we've got 40% of our organisations not sure if they'll be affected by that yet. So that's an interesting point to take from that. Okay, then moving on, because I am acutely aware of the time that we've got available to us. Statutory parental bereavement pay and leave will come into force from the new tax year. Obviously, this is functionality that we hope is going to be very infrequently used, but Oracle have provided that functionality for organizations, and what it involves is some configuration changes that have been applied for the recording of dependents, and I've just highlighted a couple of the fields there that have been added and not added, sorry, but do need to be maintained in order to ensure that if you do use the delivered functionality for SPBP, that it does process correctly for any employees that are affected by this. On top of that, the maintain parental leave page has been updated so that a new SPB value can be accessed from the absence code in the drop down as highlighted there, and also the date of death will actually be pulled through from the maintain parental, not maintain parental leave, the prior page for the setup of dependents as appropriate there. And then on top of that, a new absence event or absence take has also been provided for you to make use of as necessary in order to calculate and process any payments that may be required under this absence type. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that should you choose to make use of this this functionality on top of the configuration changes that are supplied by Oracle, you may well have to update your configuration yourself as well to take this into account for any sections, eligibility groups and things like that that may be affected in your own process lists should you have made any changes away from the actual delivered functionality there. So that's worth bearing in mind. Okay, off payroll worker rules. Some changes coming in this year. In order to deal with those, there is a couple of new items that have been made available. The maintain tax details page for UK employees, that's received an update so that you can actually indicate that the person that you're recording here is an off payroll worker. And that can then be used to exclude that person from being eligible for some of the statutory absence payments and processes alongside that. And as you can see there from the second page I pulled up there, which is one of the example delivered process lists there, you can actually, a new formula has been supplied that you can add as a condition to relevant sections within the process list to actually ensure that anybody who is marked as an off payroll worker will be excluded from those processes and won't be accidentally picked up for any payments they're not eligible for. Worth bearing in mind, especially if you've set up your own process lists, that new formula will have to be applied manually to the processes that you're using. So please bear that in mind. And what that would actually do is exclude the affected people from things like SSP, SMP, and any of the other statutory absence payments that would otherwise be applicable. And we're just jumping in with a second poll now regarding off-payroll worker rules to see how many of you are actually affected by that. Okay, so that looks like quite a good cross section there. So almost half were saying yes, we're definitely going to be affected by this. A third of the group are definite no's in this, but then we've still got possibly a quarter of our group who we're not sure whether or not at this point you're going to be affected by that either now or in the future. So like I say, it would be worth bringing those changes into play and updating your config accordingly, just to make sure that everything is covered off. Okay, moving on. Class 1A NICs for termination payments. There's been some new rules applied to that to ensure that employer NI contributions are calculated on termination payments above the £30,000 payment threshold, whilst ensuring that employee NI contributions are exempt from any payment that could be deemed as a valid termination payment. There's going to be some manual config required in this area as well, because you will whilst Oracle are supplying the relevant config elements and accumulators to capture the relevant gross payments that may be eligible for this calculation, you will need to make sure that any of the earnings elements, that you have set up that for this particular process are added in and the config updated accordingly. So that will need to be taken into account as well. And then just one last point about everything that's coming out would be the fact that the full payment summary and employer payment summary RTI extracts have been updated, as they would be every year, for any new data items that need to be added to them, and where appropriate, any field rule and label items have been changed accordingly as well, just for anything that you might see on your output. Okay, application of patches and how we're actually going to plan to test those. Like I said earlier on, we've got the P60 template and the changes to FPS and the loan, the additional loan payments that were released sort of mid-year last year, around August and September last year. We can give you details after this session of what those actual patches are, just in case you need to check to make sure that they've been applied. But at the moment, we will work on the assumption that you've already applied those, but you may want to roll that into your testing for the current year end that we're talking about. And then after that, you've got the start of year update patch that we've just been going through the details on. Now, that was a release certainly for 9.2 on the 22nd of January. That is available now and can be applied whenever you're ready. However, the subsequent patch that Pravas went through in detail with us is due to be released tomorrow, and that is still the case based on what Pravas was saying earlier on. So I would say that it may well be worth thinking about applying all of the patches at the same time and doing one cycle of testing, just to see how that actually works for you thus far. Okay, we've got a couple of extra polls just to find out a little bit of extra information from you about that. So I'm going to ask Simon to do the next one now. Okay, so we're looking at 60% who are saying they haven't applied those updates yet. Certainly for the items that we talked about that would affect year end. What we will do, we will distribute to the group the patch numbers that would need to be applied, or details of where you can find that information out as well, just so you can get hold of that and make sure that where relevant, you've got people that can go away and actually sort that out for you. Okay, I'm just going to ask Simon to open up the final poll now, which is very, very similar, and just talks about the start of year patch. And I'm going to assume we'll get a similar response here. Looking at similar numbers here, broadly similar to what we had before. We've still got, let's say about just over a quarter of the group have applied that patch already. So if you carried out testing on that, then that's excellent news, because you're well set for the next release. If you haven't, then it may well be worth bundling that up with the release that's coming out tomorrow to carry out one cycle of testing, and we're actually going to look at that now. So, like I say, broadly at this stage, based on the information that we had a few weeks ago, where we knew there was a budget coming up in March, but we were already aware that there was one release already out there, and we weren't entirely sure when the next one was going to come out. It was, we may well have been leaning towards suggesting that there were two options here. The first one being applying each patch separately, going through a testing cycle for each patch before moving on to the next one, and then repeating accordingly as necessary. However, from the slide you can see here, option 2, if you haven't already applied and tested the first patch, it may well be worth just combining everything into one single test cycle and running through the process accordingly that way, and that will make it a lot easier for you to and hope, well, certainly a faster process for you to get through anyway. Okay, so what we've got on the next slide coming up is just a basic outline of the testing process or the testing cycle that we would run through when we are doing, if we were responsible as an organization for our clients' year-end testing and patch application. And hopefully it would be broadly similar to your experience, or if there's anything wildly different there, please let us know, and we can bring that into the discussion. So I'm just going to open up the next slide, and it will start to populate with various sections as we go here. So first of all, we recommend that you have a control environment, or at least something that's temporary, where you can take, and I'm going to be referring to monthly payrolls here all the time, so I apologize to people who are running weekly payrolls as well. Where we talk about month 12, please just assume we're talking about the last weekly payroll for the period, for the year as well, if necessary. And what we would suggest you did was take, just before your last period for the year is finalized, take a copy of that, move it into a control environment, even if it's only on a temporary basis that you will overwrite afterwards, and actually rerun the month 12 or week 52, 53 period, and extract all of the results that you might need to use in a compare a little bit later on. Now, if you could hang on to that environment as a control environment, and we know for lots of organizations, environmental availability may be at a premium, so you might not have the luxury of being able to hold on to this environment whilst you run through your whole testing cycle. But it would be really, really good if you could hang on to that information and be able to go back to it every so often. I know we've got a question that has come in that I'll come back to in just a second, if that's okay. So then on top of that, what we would suggest is, if you had a second environment which you use for your patching, again, take your production environment as it was just before you finalized month 12, move that into the patched environment, apply all of the patches that you're talking about testing at this time. So if that's a single patch that you're going to test, then that's what you would do, or you roll all your patches up into one update, apply that, and make any necessary config changes manually that are required at this stage as well, and that becomes your patched environment for you to test. And then what we would suggest you do is rerun your 2020 month 12 in that environment, extract your results, and then run a compare between the two to make sure that there is nothing in certainly the start of year patch that has inadvertently affected anything going forward before it should, basically, in the current tax year that you're working with. Now, about 5 minutes left. We're coming to the end of the scheduled session, but I've just got about 5 minutes to run through, if that's okay with everybody. And then, assuming that you are happy to move forward, you would finalize that month 12, move forward into running the month 1 payroll for the 2021 tax year without any extra data in there or anything like that, just to give it a quick test run through and look at what the areas that you would expect to be affected. And then as part of that, you would extract your results, and then what we would recommend you did was do a gross and net pay comparisons between the month 12 run and the month 1 of the new tax year run that you've got there, just to give you a rough idea of whether or not there is anything that's gone wildly different, because sometimes, you know, we've had experiences in the past where where there was an update supplied which then took particular information out of, say, a section or something like that inadvertently, which was dated for, say, the 6th of April 2020, and then so it only became apparent that there was a problem when you ran the first period of the new tax year. So it's that kind of thing that you'd be looking for there, just to make sure that roughly the system works, the results are coming out as expected, based on the tolerance levels that you would have in there for any changes to tax or anything like that. And then, assuming that you're happy to move on from that, or you'd go back again and check the results, you can then what we would suggest you did was, for the specific areas that affect you or could affect the organization that you know have changed between the two, from one tax year to the next, put together test data that is specific, enter that into your month 1 payroll, run your payroll, and do specific checks against all of those areas to make sure that you are happy with the results before you get to the point where you want to sign off and say, yeah, all of this can be moved into our production environment. We're happy that that everything is working as we expected, and we can move this forward now. What I would say is, you know, regardless of whether or not you've said we're going to test each patch individually, or we are going to apply all the patches and do it as a single shot, you know, the principles of this this approach remain the same. It's just that you'd have to repeat the cycle for each patch that you were testing individually. Worth bearing in mind, if we do go down the approach of testing all the patches that are available as of the end of tomorrow, we do still need to be aware that if there's something that comes out in the budget on March the 11th, that's going to leave things very, very tight if it needs to be in place for the start of the tax year, more so for some of our clients who pay very early in April than others might. But we will just need to assess that as and when we know what's coming out of the budget. Hopefully there will be no further changes that we need to worry about, but we will be keeping an eye on that, and as will Oracle, and they will advise us as we go forward. But if we've got everything else tested and we're happy that everything is in place and working for us, then hopefully if there is a new patch to be added, we're well set to get that in as quickly as possible and get that tested as well. Okay, then move on to one last section. The PUM 33 release has got some new functionality in it that you may or may not be aware of, and the one that's jumped out at us as being particularly interesting is the new payee selection functionality that is available, which means that with regard to employees that would actually be picked up for payroll processing, you now have more control over that than we had in the past. Whereas previously, you know, the payroll status had to be one of the 4 that you can see on that screen there, be it active, leave with pay, retired with pay, or terminated with pay. anything like that, they were the status that would actually get picked up for processing as a norm for an individual. We are now in a position where, with that new page that's being provided, you can actually add in rows there and add in specific payroll statuses. The obvious one being leave of absence, which previously, if an employee was on a leave of absence, they would not get picked up for payroll processing. The ability for you to do that now exists to actually to control a little bit more, the individuals that would get picked up for processing. Obviously, we're a long way down the line in the life of global payroll here, where everybody has gotten used to who gets picked up automatically in the payroll run. But we just want to highlight this to you as what we see as interesting new functionality that will allow you to control that kind of thing a little bit more yourself. Alongside this particular new function, the payee selection ID, as it's called there, which is the one that's delivered is STDRD, which I believe is for standard. For any of your pay groups, you would have to update. There's a new field actually in the definition for that payee selection ID, so you'd have to add that in to any of your pay groups. Now, you're going to have to do this anyway as part of the functionality if you apply that particular update, because obviously the functionality is changing slightly. It's also worth bearing in mind that whilst the initial new functionality is available with release 33, there is a subsequent bug fix that also needs to be applied to ensure that you don't get into the situation where nobody gets identified on your payroll run. Both that bug number is also the patch is already available as well, so we will just send out some details on what those patch numbers are for anybody who's actually interested in that as well, just in case there's anybody who does want to be an early adopter of that new functionality and start using it accordingly. So that's the bit that I wanted to just highlight to you, which has got nothing to do with year end, but it is interesting new functionality, and it's something that has come up on a number of occasions, especially where you may have a mature user of PeopleSoft HR who then starts to use global payroll and then has been affected by the fact that they've always used leave of absence rather than paid leave of absence, and don't want to have to change their internal business processes. Now you've got that the functionality does exist now for you to be allow you to do that and control that in some way. So one last call for any further questions that people may have. You can always drop us a line to our contact details, which you should have available to you if there is anything that comes out subsequently from today's session. But otherwise, I'm just going to hand back to Simon just to finish off the session for us.
Very good, thank you. Thanks, Gary. That was great. Yeah, just really thanks everyone for attending. I hope you got some real value from the session. We are planning to hopefully do another one later in the year if that's what you guys want. But we'll see how that goes. Do send any feedback you might have on today's session, good or not so good, however way you want to see it. Always looking to improve. So thanks again, and until next time, thanks very much.
Thanks all.